Hey everyone, it's Katie Rustler of Positive Connections, and I want to talk to you today about differences that we have with our partner in our relationships. So very often when I have a couple come into my office, within the first 2 to 3 sessions, I have them do kind of a variety of different tests to check out personality differences, arguing style differences. And overall, a lot of the questions I ask, I find out if there are cultural differences, like what are the family background differences, because the reality is we are 2 separate people and there are a lot of differences. I don't care how long you have been with your partner, there are some differences about them that will not change. And very often, if we don't see those differences for what they truly are, and we see them more as annoyances or things to bother us or problems, then we're going to have issues. And you know, my goal is for you guys to stay in healthy, successful relationships. So I want to give you some tools today on how to really identify what are things that are just like annoyances and problems that you have with a person, and what are the things that these are personality type differences or family background differences or cultural differences that might be getting in the way, and how you can better accept those, okay? So first, you know, this week I've been talking about cultural differences, and I've had so many people sort of private message me about the whole argument over ketchup. Now, if you don't know about the discussion my husband and I, before we were married, had about ketchup, then you need to read the blog post, and I'll make sure to link it in the comments below. But the topic over ketchup is what helped me to see in my own relationship, holy cow, this is something simple and small, and for me and for him now silly, but represented something huge. The issue with the ketchup was that I put the ketchup on the table because we were eating something that had fried potatoes in it, and for me, culturally, for a variety of reasons, it was normal. And for him, it was not. And he didn't understand it. For him, culturally, putting like ketchup is an unhealthy thing, and it was being put on the table, and you know, we're not unhealthy people. What are you doing? Well, we're eating fried potatoes. So number one, that's not the healthiest. But I came at it from a point of view of this is what my family did, and this is what's normal. In most American homes, you would see this. And he was coming at it from a German perspective and a different family perspective of this is not normal. And instead of us just saying, oh wow, look at those differences, we argued. Like, we argued. I don't even remember if we actually even ate dinner. I feel like we did, because we wouldn't have wasted those, we call them potato pancakes, wasted those. But we argued because we felt so passionate about our side. And why we were so passionate, what we later figured out, was we were upset because we were basically being told by another person how your family did it or how your culture does it is wrong. There's something wrong with it. Instead of going, oh, well, that's different. I've never thought about eating it that way. I usually have it with applesauce. Oh, okay. Well, we can do both. We didn't go at it with that perspective clearly. And to be honest, there were times in the argument where it was just kind of like, if we're going to argue about things like this, like, is this going to work? It wasn't until we had this like pause, and you know, when you've had those hour-long, you know, hours-long arguments, you have that moment where you go, are we really arguing over ketchup, or is there something else going on? And all of a sudden, it's like the fog clears, and you can see, hey, actually, we're having a discussion and an argument about cultural differences and family norms. And how we went about it was attacking the other person and not trying to learn. So once we figured out there was this cultural difference going on, it helped us see in future arguments when it felt awkward, uncomfortable, something felt attacked within us, to say out loud, is this a cultural difference? Wait, hold on, let's not go, not another ketchup incident, please. Is this a cultural difference? And we found many times it was. If it wasn't cultural, it was a personality difference. If it wasn't that, it was a different way of arguing. And then once we started to see that there are these differences we have, we learned how to sort of in a sense, assimilate. And if you are used to being in a new culture, you know about the term assimilation, but bring them into who we are as a couple rather than fight them off. So cultural differences, like I said, when you have arguments and you feel that sort of tug of like, I feel like you're personally attacking me right now over something that seems so small, you might ask yourself, is there a cultural difference here? I was talking with a friend recently and she said, my husband and I had an argument over piercing our daughter's ears right after she was born. She goes, I now realize like that was a cultural thing. My family always did it, but I see it really is a cultural norm for me and it wasn't for him. And we had to have those discussions over why I wanted that done. See, that's something that she may not have thought about, like, oh, wow, my culture does this versus just my family did it, so this seems normal. That this is something that is culturally acceptable and typical, and so it feels regular, normal, and the way you're supposed to do things. And so when a couple can come at it from that standpoint of, well, just because your culture does it, do you want to or not? It can help the discussion further along. So that looks at your cultural differences. Now let's talk about personality differences. And this one, I got to tell you, in sessions with couples is the one that I giggle inside a little bit about, because there are some things that it's clear to me when they're having arguments if it's a personality difference. If at the end of the day you come home and one of you in your relationship goes, oh man, do you want to go out? Like go do something, go out to eat, or, you know, hey, let's go see that movie. And you or the other person says, oh no, I just want to stay home. I'm so tired of being out. I don't want to. And if the response is you never want to do anything, you never want to get out, you never want to be around people, then that person is an extrovert and the other person is an introvert. Now we're all on a spectrum, but usually somebody has a little bit more of one side than the other. And I giggle inside because I've seen this fight so many times, where one person is like, I have been around people all day because of work or being with the kids all day, whatever it is. I'm exhausted. I just want to lay on the couch and not think about things. And the other person who is energized by people wants to be around everybody and is going, why do you want to be isolated? I want to be around people and get energized and excited. So that is a small way that I tend to pick out, oh, here's an extrovert versus an introvert. Now, if it's somebody who is more of a thinker versus a feeler, you see that in how they talk about things. Well, that just didn't seem logical. That just didn't make sense to me. Versus, well, I really felt hurt by the things you were saying. Like, you called me this name and that made me feel those types of things. I can go, hey, that's a difference. And that's going to affect how they communicate. And it's good that they know that. Also, type A personalities versus a type B personality. Understanding that type A wants deadlines, wants things done, doesn't understand why these things are not getting done. Whereas the other personality type is like, you know, having a deadline is like a reference point, an idea, and it just creates a lot of stress, and I don't really want that in my life. When I can see those personality differences happen in the relationship too, I can see why a lot of fights occur, especially after kids enter the home, because there's such a need for some structure and some routine, but also some flexibility. So what I try to do is to teach couples how they have strengths in their personality type that they can bring to the relationship versus like slam a wall against the other person with, this is the way it should be. This is how you should think. This is how these things should occur. With the example of the extrovert and the introvert, I typically say, what's a good compromise? How about 2 nights out of the week you do go out? And even though that introvert person might be a little more like, but I'm so exhausted, maybe you find a way to see the fun in it. And the extrovert picks a location that won't be so draining. So it's always about compromise and seeing the strength in what you bring to the table. So we look at our cultural differences, we look at our family differences, we look at our personality differences, and if we go back to family differences, think about how you were raised, the messages you were sent, what was normal in your family. Did you guys wake up first thing in the morning and eat breakfast in your pajamas? Or did you have to get dressed for the day and then go eat breakfast? Does that cause problems in your relationship now, if you guys have different ways of doing it as a family? What did holidays look like? What do birthdays look like? Some of those things can be cultural, but many times it's family norms. So instead of going, it should be my way because that makes sense. Go into it, even if you guys have been married or together for a long time. What are the things that we have chosen to create in our relationship, chosen to traditions and holidays, chosen to how do we communicate with each other, the things we've chosen to do? And are we choosing to do them, or are we just fighting against something bigger than us? So here's an example. Okay, I never had an iPhone until about a year and a half ago. I bought one. I always had Windows phones, okay? And so when I got my iPhone, I was like, oh, all my friends have them. This is so cool. But I started to like push buttons on it and I'm like, wait, that's not how you turn on. Where's the volume? How do I take a screenshot? Why on earth is that located there? Because I went into getting this new phone thinking it needed to look like my old phone. When I stopped and realized I needed to just learn a new way, learn a new system, not get angry that it didn't make sense, not get angry that it wasn't easy, and figure out how to make it easy by getting to know it better, then I actually started to accept my iPhone and enjoy it, and I didn't fight it as much. Now, there are still some days where I have not figured out why or what, but it's much more rare, and thank goodness for YouTube and friends who have only lived with an iPhone. But this is a good example of how we often struggle with looking at differences with our partners. We think, you don't look or feel or act the way I do. Why don't you do the things I do? And then we don't really accept them. We fight against them versus seeing their strengths, the difference. Why do they do things differently? Getting to know it better rather than making them feel like they're a problem for doing things differently than the way you do it, or thinking differently, or believing differently. So I want you to be thinking about in your own relationship, what are the cultural differences? What are those family differences? And what are the personality differences that might be causing a lot of your arguing? And how can you take a step back, both of you, and say, how can we better understand each other so that we're not arguing so much? And what are things we're willing to compromise on or create a new normal for our family and our relationship, rather than continue to fight this sort of thing within us that makes us feel like we're fighting a very personal side of ourselves. We feel attacked very often when these things come up because we think there's something wrong with us when there isn't. It's just something unique and neat about you that you and your partner can grow stronger on, okay? So I want to know in the comments below, what are some of the things you took away from this talk today? Are there cultural differences you didn't realize? Are there personality differences you thought were just them trying to be annoying to you? Are there family differences that you hadn't taken a moment to go, how do we create a new normal and a new tradition within our family based off of both of our family's traditions?